Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the March 25th meeting of the Pacheco Stormwater District. Let's start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we start off with public comment. These would be comments about anything that is not on the agenda. And before we take public comment, Victor has something he'd like to read.
Yes. The Pacheco Stormwater District welcomes your comments. Each individual speaker will be limited to a presentation total of 3 minutes. When addressing the trustees via Zoom, phone, or in chambers, please state your name and county in which you reside for the record. Please address the trustees as a whole through the chair. If participating via Zoom, select the Participants tab and click the Raise Hand icon. If you are using a phone, please press star 9 to raise your hand. When your turn arrives, you will hear that you have been unmuted. If you are participating in person at the chambers, please complete a speaker card identifying the item on which you wish to speak and provide your completed card to the clerk prior to consideration of the item. Speaker cards are available on the table at the entrance to the chambers.
Okay, is there any public comment?
There appears to be no public comment right now.
Okay, then we will move on to the next item, and this is the consent agenda. So there are 2 items, the acknowledgement of certificate of posting and approval of the minutes from last month. Is there a motion to accept or approve the items on the consent agenda?
I motion the certificate of posting and the approval of the Pacific Stormwater District minutes.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Next, we will move on to the regular agenda. And the first item this evening is a presentation by Ryan McCarter of Valley Water regarding the Pacheco Dam expansion. So welcome, Ryan.
I'll start over. Good evening, trustees. I'm Ryan McCarter, Deputy Operating Officer of the Dam Safety and Capital Delivery Division for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. So I was asked by request to come and speak about the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project that we've been working on for several years now at Valley Water. And we also have our Director, John Varela, is on the line on Zoom. If the Director wanted to make some opening remarks, I'd invite you to do that now.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. So thank you for inviting us. And I'm John Varela. I'm Director of District 1, which encompasses the southern portion of Santa Clara County and also into San Benito County. So the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project, it's a collaboration between Valley Water, San Benito County Water District, and Pacheco Water District, past Water District. Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project is a strategic and long-term investment toward ensuring a more reliable supply of safe, clean drinking water in the face of climate change. The project will boost Pacheco Reservoir's operational capacity from approximately 5,500 acre-feet to up to 140,000 acre-feet. enough to supply up to 1.4 residents, 1.4 million residents with water for 1 year in an emergency. The project will allow reduce the frequency and severity of water shortages during droughts, protect our drinking water supply and the infrastructure, and of course, improve the fish habitat. So there's many more things that I'm sure Ryan is going to cover in this presentation. I just want to say thank you for inviting us. And Ryan, you're on.
All right, thank you. Okay, can everyone see my slide? Okay, good. Okay, so Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project is actually a photo of the existing reservoir looking south towards Pacheco Peak. We were doing some geotechnical investigations a few years back here, so you can kind of see what the lay of the land looks like out there. We have a few project partners on the project itself. You can see here on the map we have Santa Clara County shown there in the light bluish gray. Up above, that's us. Valley Water manages the water in Santa Clara County. We have San Benito County down below, and we are working with San Benito County Water District on this project, and I'll get to that more in later slides. And then we also have the Pacheco Pass Water District, so that's the current owner of the Pacheco Reservoir that the North Fork Dam holds back. So they're the current owners of that facility, and they own the water rights, and as well as they manage the groundwater in that small grayish area right below their bubble there. Just a little bit more on the site geography here on this slide. You can see we're right off Pacheco Pass Highway, Highway 152. You can see the inset in the top right there. It also shows the expanded reservoir and what that looks like in yellow. So quite a bit more. It's about 1,300 acres in surface area. You can see the small grayish color below that. That's the existing reservoir. So basically the new dam would be located up at the northern end of the existing reservoir and then expand the reservoir behind that. And you can also see it's right there on Pacheco Creek. It's on the North Fork of Pacheco Creek currently, and just downstream of the existing dam, the South Fork Pacheco Creek meets the North Fork and becomes Pacheco Creek proper, and then flows down into San Felipe Lake area, into Miller Canal, and out into the Pajaro River. You see the Pajaro River watershed is shown there in green. There's another slide that'll show that again later. But you can see it's a pretty large watershed that contributes to the river, and I'll go through what the North Fork Pacheco Creek watershed looks like in relation to the entire Pajaro River watershed later. So some of the items that this project is aiming to address, number one for Valley Water is in the middle there for emergency water supply. So we really identify a need for having a water supply in the event of any emergencies, including extended droughts or outages in the Delta. We do import about 50% of our water into Santa Clara County, and so an outage in the Delta in either imported water system would cause a pretty drastic decline in our available supplies in a given year. So we're looking at it as first and foremost an emergency water supply. There's some other benefits. There's multiple benefits. First there on the left is restoring federally threatened steelhead fish habitat. So that's along Pacheco Creek. The South Central California coast steelhead is a threatened species as defined by U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service. And there's been a 90% population decline in the Pajaro watershed that's been measured since back in the 1960s. So they identified that Pacheco Creek could have improved habitat. It currently goes dry most years. There's just not enough water in the existing Pacheco Reservoir to allow that creek to stay wet during the summer. So we'd be changing our operations up, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then these other two here, the improving the Delta watershed wetlands, that's through an exchange required through our state funding. I won't get too much into detail in this presentation. Eliminating the water quality issues from San Luis Reservoir with the imported water that we do take in low point years when we're in droughts and San Luis Reservoir gets low, our intakes start pulling in water with a lot of algae in it. So this would be able to use Pacheco to bring water from the new Pacheco expansion instead of from San Luis Reservoir, and also do some blending to improve our water quality input there. So that's kind of just a secondary benefit. Then, of course, we have the reduction of downstream flooding, which is an incidental benefit. Having a larger dam there would reduce flooding along Pacheco Creek, and I'm going to focus my presentation later on that aspect of the project. So So how the project will be operated, really, this is kind of a lot on the slide, but just kind of geographically how the operations are all planned out. It's really a multi-function, and I just kind of sum that up into two different functions, how this reservoir will be operated. So there's basically two inputs and two outputs. So of course you have the natural water coming in from the watershed and being impounded behind the expanded dam. And then that water will be used for releases into Pacheco Creek. And we'll start making those releases more regular, so it'll be more of a perennial flow rather than a flashy, lots of flows in the winter and dry in the summer. It'll be a much more consistent flow in Pacheco Creek with the operations we're looking at there. And that's kind of one half of it. The other half is using it as kind of an off-stream storage for our imported water supplies. So we currently import water from San Luis Reservoir, you can see there on the right side, and that comes downhill, goes right past where the existing Pacheco Reservoir is. But we'd be making a new pipeline connection into the new expanded reservoir where we'd be able to pump water into the reservoir and out. So we'd be storing our excess imported water supplies, or in wet years when there's an abundance of water, we'd be storing it in the expanded reservoir and using that for our water supply and our emergency storage that I mentioned earlier. So really what this project does in both of those uses is takes advantage of wet years and stores that water for dry years. That's really the purpose of this project, and trying to balance that out for both the environmental habitat on Pacheco Creek and our water supply. So what do the facilities of this project look like? So we're at about we're working on our 60% level design. So we have completed a 30% design that's gone through review with the California Division of Safety of Dams, and they provided comments. And what this looks like is a reservoir expansion that's about 140,000 acre feet. So that's about 25 times larger than the existing 5,500 acre feet reservoir. The earth-filled dam would be about 310 feet high. I think the current dam is about 80 or 90 feet tall, and Anderson is about 240. So this is bigger than Anderson Dam, which is one of the largest dams in the area. It have an emergency spillway similar to Anderson, a concrete channel off to the side, so that the dam couldn't be overtopped. Pretty sophisticated inlet-outlet works system with 3 different levels of intakes, and basically the water would go 2 ways in and out of the reservoir for our water supply functions. And we would need a pump station to convey that water. You can see down here in green, we have a preliminary pump station location planned out there. The existing dam, which is down here sort of at the bottom of the page, which is not really a color for it, but just pointing to this area, that would be decommissioned and removed. So that portion of the creek and reservoir would become a new section of creek and restoration along that 1.3 miles of channel. We'd also need an upgraded power system, so we'd be doing a power transmission line extension about 6 miles to the east towards San Luis Reservoir to tie into the system there. And then we'd also be doing some roadway improvements at Bell Station and State Route 152 in order for us to have safe construction access in and out. Now that would be temporary, so we're looking at building a temporary overpass to basically bring trucks on and off the highway, and then that would be removed once the project is complete construction. Okay, just going through the construction costs here. So back in 2017, when we applied for the Water Storage Investment Program grant through Prop 1 and the California Water Commission, our conceptual project was price tagged at $969 million, and that was in 2015 dollars. That was part of the application process for all the projects that applied to cost their projects in 2015 dollars, so we could all compare apples to apples. So that was $969 million. Just advancing that to 2023 dollars is about 1.4 billion. So just inflation year over year adds quite a bit to it. And we've also seen a lot of economic factors in the past few years contribute to cost increases, with our consumer price index going up. Construction cost trends are moving up faster than inflation, and also land values are increasing as well. So it just kind of indicates how the costs have increased. We've also had some upgrades to our project design, which have added elements that we didn't have before. Probably accounts for about 30% of the cost estimate. So we're looking at about a capital cost of $2 billion now for the project. So very, very large project. The total project costs in our capital improvement program is $2.8 billion. So that includes the capital costs, all the soft costs, as well as inflation through the construction period, which is currently 2027 to 2035 is our estimated construction time. Okay, so some of the key milestones here. In fall of 2021, we had hit a major milestone after about 3 years of work on the draft environmental impact report. So we did pretty substantial investigations in the field of the inundation area and the dam area, developed that draft EIR with all the impacts and proposed mitigation. We also completed at the same time our supplemental feasibility report, and we had a feasibility determination by the California Water Commission that the project was still feasible from the application time. So that was a statutory milestone to meet those qualifications for the draft EIR and feasibility by the end of 2021. So we met that. Since then, we've been working on the 30% design and the subsequent 60% design, and working on our next environmental document, which will be a recirculated draft environmental impact report. And the reason for that is because we didn't have the full extension of the power line in our original environmental impact report. So we're going to be adding that in, and it's a pretty major change to our project footprint, extending that out further. So that's the reason for that. And then we'll be hopefully certifying our final EIR and EIS in summer of 2026, and then moving through all the other approvals we need for beginning construction in 2027. And as I mentioned, that would be going out till 2035. So just covered a lot of information in a short amount of time, 5 years of work in the making. So if there's any questions here, I'll pause before I get more into the incidental flood benefits. Questions so far? Okay. Well, that's a good sign. Okay, so the incidental benefits on the flooding. So the larger dam would reduce flooding in the downstream communities. And in January and February 2017, there was significant flooding on Pacheco Creek, as you all are aware. And those were mostly because of the levee breach that happened back then. And we really looked closely at the data from the Dunville gauge. It's called Dunville, but it's actually at Walnut Avenue, just off Pacheco Pass Highway. That was measuring about 12,000 CFS during both of those events in January and February 2017. And I remember just today that when I talked to you folks before, you all think about it in stage and height of the flows. So I believe that's about 16 feet at Walnut Avenue. In January 2023, there was a peak that was over 20 feet at the stage, and that was kind of the next big flood that happened in 2023. So looking at those events, we can see that there'd be a dramatic reduction in some of those peak flows. So just kind of the background on the flood control benefits. In 2017, with our water storage investment program application, we did identify that there would be benefits for flood control. However, that we didn't monetize them. So this is we call it incidental flood benefit. This isn't a flood project per se. It's really a water supply, a water storage project that has also environmental benefit to Pacheco Creek, but we're not claiming any monetized benefits for flooding. And through that application process, the California Water Commission also had their own finding that I quoted here, basically that the project provides incidental flood benefits. It should not be monetized, and the additional storage is available, and if a flood event occurs before the reservoir is full, then there would be an incidental benefit. So they basically agreed with our findings on the incidental flood reduction. Here's an image of the Pacheco Creek and Pajaro River watershed. So you can see the North Fork watershed, which would be captured by the expanded dam there in the green in the upper right area. So it's a pretty sizable portion of the entire Pajaro River watershed, but really a major contributor to the Pacheco Creek watershed itself. That northern area of Henry Coast State Park and above the North Fork watershed there collects quite a bit of water, as we've seen through our instrumenting and analysis of the data to date. And you can see also I added the Pacheco Stormwater District there in the center in purple, and you can see the orange portion that's in Santa Clara County as well, just to give reference to the area along Pacheco Creek that this district is in charge of. So what we saw was after the drought conditions in 2021 and 2022, there'd be a pretty sizable reduction in the flows that we saw in 2023. So we kind of ran through a back analysis after that happened to kind of see what that would have looked like in a kind of a real life scenario if this expanded reservoir was in place at that time. So this kind of just shows a graph of what the average available storage would be going into November, December, January, and February months. So you can see there's up to around 40,000 acre feet of water storage available, which is like 8 times what is currently available, 7 or 8 times. So quite a bit more water could be captured during those months and those initial rainstorms in a season. That's really how this would add to incidental flood protection, just by being there and collecting that water. And then that water eventually would just be timed and released into the creek over months, if not a few years, to add to that environmental benefit for the steelhead. So really it's just an attenuation through kind of knocking down those peaks that you see in Pacheco Creek. And we saw that there could be a reduction up to 46% based on the watershed and what it produces. It's kind of a hard thing to really quantify because watersheds are interesting. Not all areas of the watershed are created equal. There's rain shadows, and like these storms we've been having lately, these pockets of showers can be very scattered, so it's hard to predict where they are. But looking at the data and what we've seen, we see about a 46% potential reduction in the flows in Pacheco Creek on some of these peak storms we've seen in the past few years. This is the January 2023 flooding, as I just mentioned, and I talked about how we saw 15,800 cubic feet per second peak. That's we always look at it in volume per second. That's kind of the way we analyze it in our world. But like I said, that's over about a 20-foot stage height at the Walland Avenue gauge. So that was larger than what was seen in 2017 in both of the events then. So that was quite a bit of water. And from what we analyzed and how much water could have been captured in 2023, that could have been reduced to about 8,500 cubic feet per second, which is about 16 feet in the stage height. So pretty sizable reduction, about 4 feet less of water going through the creek in that time. So that's kind of what we came up with. Any questions?
Okay. You mentioned that this water was also going to be on hold for emergency supplies for different areas. It's in Santa Clara County, so how is that going to benefit San Benito?
For emergency water supply? So San Benito County Water District is working with us, and they're really a prime potential partner because the pipeline that comes from San Luis Reservoir also splits off at Casa de Fruta and comes down this way as well. And so if they were to invest, they would also be able to get emergency water supply at the portion of their investment as well for San Benito County Water District.
So just first choice go to Santa Clara County then?
No, it's not first choice. But they'd have to invest as a partner.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it going to be storing the water, and it's going to have a consistent flow year round through the creek, but it's going to head out to the ocean? Or is it going to be?
Yeah, eventually it would head out to the ocean. Yeah, so there's a really gravelly portion of Pacheco Creek, actually just before it enters this water district's area, where the water gets lost into the ground. That's why it goes dry so often in the summer months. And so the idea is to keep the flow going all the way to San Felipe Lake with just a minimal flow so that there's enough water in there for fish passage, but eventually it would make its way into the river and out into the ocean as well.
Because if we were going to go through a drought, would it just deplete all the water that's being held in the reservoir? If we were to go through a drought, like a massive drought again, would it deplete all that water that's being held?
I mean, if it was several years, so we basically account the water in two accounts like I described. So the water that comes into the watershed would be what's released into the creek, and the water that we we move in from our imported water supplies would be for water supply. So if we ran out of water that was in the watershed account, then we would basically have to stop releases or slow them down to very, very minimal. And then we wouldn't be releasing the water supply water into the creek. It would stay there or be used for people. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I have a question. You said when they started to release the water in the creek, and like an example in summer, the creek is supposed to be in a good condition, you know, cleaning, cleaning, have it ready, so we don't have no problems, right? Is maintains the creek, is my question. We supposed to do that before they start and release all the water.
Yeah, we don't have plans to do any work. We actually don't own any of the creek at all right now. But the flows are pretty minimal. Like they're really kind of like the most minimal flows you see during the summer months. So, I mean, they can make it through obstructions and things like that. Eventually, we're talking about like 25 cubic feet per second, which is like about what it's flowing at probably now, about a 3-foot stage height or something like that. So, was your question about would the water be obstructed by obstructions in the creek, or?
Yeah, because I don't know if you have an idea how the creek look like. Is they supposed to? I mean, we supposed to clean it, and it's not clean.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, we've done a lot of investigations in the creek along the entire stretch of it, looking primarily at the steelhead habitat and potential for steelhead to spawn in those areas and things like that. So yeah, I understand there's a lot of debris and stuff like that. So I don't think it would change too much to what it is now. I mean, you're always going to get flows if it rains, right? So yeah, I don't think that there's going to be any mandates for cleaning the creek or anything like that associated. But I think it would just kind of be similar to natural. We're trying to basically imitate a natural condition, through these releases. So.
Okay.
Okay, Ryan, I have a few questions, but first I think we'll go to I think there are some people on Zoom that have some questions. Are there raised hands there?
Yes, we have Grant Bryans. You have been muted.
Hello there. So I know that all of the members of the board are quite familiar with me because, of course, I've been involved in the whole process getting things back going again originally. I actually have several questions for you, Mr. McCarter. The first one is, and this is a technical question, what is the rationale for removing the old reservoir and not actually keeping it with a small level of potential maintenance and upgrade to make sure that there are no issues with holes or something like that from the 1938 structure?
So the rationale is, well, we did a feasibility analysis. We looked at improving the current dam site and raising that dam. We don't currently own the dam, so we're not looking at this as like a maintenance or a fix for the current facility. And this is more of an opportunity for a larger expansion for water supply purposes. But yeah, the existing dam site doesn't have the geography or adequate geologic conditions for a large dam at that site. If that answers your question.
That wasn't what I was asking, though. What I was thinking about is that given that it does exist, and given that it is something which is a very working water storage facility, would there be, I mean, is there a specific reason for not retaining that? Maybe it can't be filled all the way to the 5,500 acre feet height in these circumstances, and it's desirable then to go ahead and perhaps have a pipe extra outlet, that's possible. But my question is, what are the reasons for not keeping that existing asset in place?
Do you mean keeping it in place downstream of the proposed expanded dam, or
Correct,
keeping the-
because it is in fact downstream. Yes.
We actually did consider leaving that in place, but the flows that we would have to make for if there was like a seismic event, Division of Safety of Dams requires us to do larger releases or have the ability to do so to lower the reservoir. And so these are like on the order of 1,000 to 2,000 cubic feet per second. So it would cause problems if there was an obstruction in the way. But we did look into making a large tunnel through the existing dam rather than removing it. But yeah, we went through a lot of different alternatives and how to handle the decommissioning of the existing facility.
Okay, so what you're saying is though that those potential seismic event releases, those of course would also take out the levees on Pacheco Creek and cause an event much larger than has ever been experienced in the northern San Benito County area of flooding, correct?
That's not correct. No.
Because with the amount that you're talking about on the cubic feet release level, that's what I'm basing that comment on.
Yeah, so the floods in 2023 were 15,000 CFS, and we're talking about 2,000 CFS release, which is like a...
Okay, so, sorry, so there's an order of magnitude difference, almost.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Second question, this is an easy one. Is it possible for a citizen like myself, I've read hundreds of EIRs, and I'd actually be interested in reading the EIR to see if there are some things there that haven't been covered in the press summaries and that sort of thing that have come out?
Yeah, it's all available. You can access it through valleywater.org. Go to
Got
our
it.
project updates, Pacheco Reservoir Expansion, and it'll take you to links, and you can actually read the entire document.
Gotcha. Okay. Next item. The comments about steelhead habitat on Pacheco Creek, and that this would be designed to help the steelhead. You are aware, of course, that there has never been, not just within historic times, as in since the Spanish came to California, but long before that, there has never been steelhead in Pacheco Creek, Tequesquita Slough, etc., correct?
We've actually have research from scientists, San Jose State professors that have identified steelhead in Pacheco Creek.
Now, but I'm talking about historically. The only reason why steelhead could have reached Pacheco Creek, and it's, shall we say, going to be an incredibly rare and unsustainable event, is because of Miller Canal. Miller Canal is the only connection of actual deeper than a few inches water flow that has been from San Felipe Lake to Pajaro River. And that, of course, dates back to the late 19th century. I believe, wasn't it 1897 or something like that?
I'm not sure about the date on Miller Canal, but yeah, I'm aware that that is the route that they take to get.
Yeah, and so the point that I'm getting at is that the expansion of the habitat is not necessarily a benefit, because the actual manner in which Pacheco Creek flows and also the cover is such that it is definitely not a friendly spot. And that would also mean that you would have to have a high level of flow in Miller Canal going from San Felipe Lake to allow connection to the Pajaro River sufficiently deep, because the temperatures of the water going between the Pajaro River and San Felipe Lake exceed those that it's possible for steelhead to actually survive in for more than a few hours.
Grant, this is Michelle. I'm just going to intervene. You've actually gone past your 3 minutes, but if you
And
have
I
any
have
other,
4 more items too.
Okay, can you just pick your best question, and
Okay.
we'll do one
The
more question.
reason I brought that up, just to clarify for everyone, is that this actually then goes into um, talking about the consistent year-round flows. There are issues with that as well, that if there isn't a reduced flow level during the summertime, then it's not possible to maintain the creek as far as controlling the blockages. And that's actually been part of the problem in the last few years and why the levee breaks occurred. So that is something which needs to be considered by SCVWD. It's very important to not just treat Pacheco Creek as being, oh, it's not our affair except for the perceived fish benefit. And the other thing that I was going to say is that as the members of the board are aware, the historical manner in which maintenance has been done would be impossible if, in fact, their plan was implemented to have the consistent flows during the entire year or close to consistent flows. So there's a design issue in operation. Not that this is a bad idea to have the dam, but it's a matter of that there's a misconception there of the potential environmental benefits with the manner in which they're planning on operating. And I'd love to have more conversation with you on that offline, Mr. McCarty.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
We have an additional comment in chambers. Listen to the floor. Can you please approach the podium?
Actually, I think, hello, my name is Cinda Florent. Brian Grant, he actually brought it up, and that's the continuous flow of water could impact the maintenance of the creek. And that's a big concern, because if there's water like there is now, about 3 feet or 4 feet, we can't go in there and maintain it. It's really difficult. I have a bunch of trees and stuff that are dying, and they're falling down and going across the creek and causing blockages. And trying to reach it from our side is very difficult. It's hard because we have buildings and homes and things like that and growing there. And so it's better to go in from the creek side. So so that was one of my main things I wanted to bring up. The other thing was that I really like the fact that you have a big project going on, and it's going to be probably a good thing that once we get this cleaned up and going right. So I see that you have a partnership with the other water districts, and I don't understand why this Pacheco stormwater district would be a partnership. There's a big scheme, so we can work together and make sure these projects and these cleanups and the flow of the waters of the waterways would be a complete connection between all that Pacheco Creek going into Poplar River and into especially the lake. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up and see if we can actually, go as a group and actually fix the problems that we have in there, especially with somebody who's really well organized and has a lot of resources. Okay, thank you.
Would you like to respond, Ryan? Or?
Yeah, no, we definitely welcome input from stakeholders, and we just kind of met recently with the Pacheco Stormwater District, so, you know, happy to keep, you know, communicating and talking through our projects in more details and kind of getting into different issues and things like that. So definitely a lot to talk about. So I think this is a good introduction, you know, officially, and yeah, hope to keep working together.
So just to clarify though, the minimal flows that would be present year round, I mean, how much water would you estimate that would be then?
It's I think that the minimum flow, so it's not a totally consistent flow throughout the year. It varies from like 25 cubic feet per second to 10, and it depends on where you're at in the creek. But basically our zone of influence is basically from the dam to San Felipe Lake or Soap Lake. So it varies on basically on what the creek looks like in that area, if it's a more braided or spread out, or if it's a small channel. You know, they're relatively low flows though. It's really just trying to keep the creek wet and having some flow in it. All that information is in the draft environmental impact report. We could dive into the details on that. I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but we've got like the flow schedule, what that looks like. It's also based on the water year, so we'd be making much smaller releases during wet years because there'd be just naturally more water there. So we'll be monitoring the flows and making sure that we're not, you know, just blindly opening the valve and that kind of thing. So, and then in dry years, of course, we'd be doing more releases to try to maintain that flow.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask for Steve Loop's input on this? Like how low does it have to be in order to do maintenance?
So I think working with Valley Water and the other two districts and Fish and Wildlife to come up with a stream maintenance agreement, I think all the agencies could come up with a plan, because the flows that Reiner mentioned are really low. I mean, 25, you know, I won't say it's dry, but it could keep the low flow channel, which is the lower part of the channel, slightly wet, like Ryan mentioned. So I think with all of us working together, we could come up with a maintenance plan. We just have to process it through Fish and Wildlife and the Water Board. But I think we could definitely maintain the major parts of the creek. And maybe there'll be, you know, working with the districts, depending on their goals, there might be a window where we can keep, you know, certain areas dry, but we just have to coordinate that a little bit. But there's plenty to clean up with, you know, if we had access to 80% of the creek during the dry season, we could clean up quite a bit, even if the low flow channel, which is the deeper part, was wet. So matter of fact, the debris channels that we cleaned up recently, the low flow channel was basically flowing while we cleaned those debris piles up recently. So it is possible to clean the creek and let the low flow channel still operate. So.
Thank you for that clarification. Do we have any further public comment?
We do not have any further public comment.
Okay. So I have another question, Ryan. Assuming that the board is on board with this project, I mean, I think it sounds like a great project, honestly. I think it could benefit us immensely. And, you know, I remember those pictures that you showed of the flood. I mean, we all lived it, so it was actually bringing back very unpleasant memories for me. But I remember sitting in my house being completely surrounded by water and thinking, what a waste. What a waste. Because, you know, when there's a drought, there's all this emphasis on you can't waste water, you can't do this, you can't flush the toilet, whatever. And then here we are completely surrounded by all this water. And so I think it sounds like a great project. Obviously, there are issues that would have to be worked out. But overall, I think it would be a benefit for this district. So assuming that the rest of the board feels the way that I do, what could we do to help further this project along?
I think just support, really, you know, just having local support, you know, from other districts and agencies is super helpful. That's really, I guess, all we could ask for, right? I mean, it's it's a big project, so controversial for a lot of reasons, but it's super expensive. That's probably one of the biggest obstacles. And so we are working on partnerships with other water agencies and trying to look at other investment partners to kind of cover part of those costs and also add to their benefit. But kind of back to what you said, this was the whole emphasis of the water storage investment program with the California Water Commission, was to provide additional storage opportunities in the state so that we don't lose all this water in wet years. And like I described, this captures both water from the watershed naturally and a place to put water in years when there's an abundance of imported water. So that's exactly what it does. And so, yeah, it's a really, unique opportunity for Valley Water. We've kind of determined this is the only place this could ever be possible in Santa Clara County to expand a reservoir, something this size, to have this amount of emergency supply and improved water supply for climate change in the future, and have environmental benefit, incidental flood reduction, all these things. And it's kind of situated in a nice geographic location there, just right next to the existing pipeline that brings our water in. So making that tie-in is pretty slick. So yeah, it's just something we're really looking at hard as an opportunity for the future, and just appreciate the support, and we'll just stay in contact and work together as as a stakeholder. And
Yeah, I mean, well, we don't have any money to invest. That's for sure. But if there are other forms of support, like, I don't know, a letter of support or some kind of resolution by the board where we're going on record to support the project, or even speaking about
Chair,
the benefits.
Chair, I have my hand up. I'd like to speak.
Oh, yes, John.
Thank you. So all those things that you're suggesting, a letter, a resolution of support, would be welcomed by the Board of Directors of Valley Water. But one more thing I want to mention to you about the creeks, cleaning the creeks. One thing that Valley Water does, we have hundreds of miles of creeks and streams throughout Santa Clara County, both in the southern part and the northern part of the county. We have volunteer programs where we bring in NGOs, school districts, Rotary, Elks, Kiwanis. They volunteer at a specific time of the year with Valley Water support and staff on site to help clean the creeks. And we do that annually. This is something that you may want to think about in your region. We may be able to assist you in how we do that in our region, and how you might be able to do that in the creeks on an annual basis as well. It's all voluntary, and there's no money involved in it other than the fact that we have our staff there to support the volunteers that are in the creeks cleaning on an annual basis. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that we have over 10 dams and reservoirs that we maintain in Santa Clara County. Our single largest reservoir currently is down for seismic retrofit, and that's Anderson Reservoir. So we have a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission mandate to reconfigure our outlet, and then we're going to lower the dam and rebuild it, and that's the state project for the safety of dams, and we're working on that project. That's about a 5 to 10 year project. So what I would like to do is I would like to invite members of the San Benito County Water District and the Pacheco Pass Water District to come to Santa Clara County. We want to give you a tour of what we do and where we are. And first we could start off at the Advanced Water Purification Facility, which is in the northern part of the county, which we are purifying close to 40 million gallons of water that we can recharge at some point, because that's what we consider the water supply sustainability in our future. I'd like to invite your people to come up, give you a complete tour of our facility, and then we'll give you a tour of Anderson Dam, show you what we're doing, give you an idea what a large dam looks like, so that you have a conception of what Pacheco will look like in the future. We're open to do this, and I invite you, and we can make arrangements to have you come and talk to some of our other board members as well, because you have some really significant questions. And we're a large water district. We supply water to over 2 million people. We have 7 districts that we represent in our county. So we're big. And I understand we're like the 800-pound gorilla coming into your bedroom and you're saying, who are these people invading our area? But we need to get to know each other and collaborate with each other and work with each other. And we, Valley Water, want to support you and help you as best we can. So it's an open invitation. Love to have you come up and tour our facilities. Let's make that happen.
Well, thank you, John. We'll definitely take you up on your offer to get to know you better, work with you, possibly take those tours.
Yes.
Would definitely would like to work with you further. So thank you for that invitation.
Great, absolutely.
All right. So are there any other comments from the trustees? Or questions? No. Okay, and there's no other public comment?
No, there are no further, any other public comment.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ryan, for that very informative presentation. And thank you, John, for attending as well. Again, we hope that this is just the beginning of further collaboration. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you in our area soon.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so we are now ready to move on. And to what is normally number 1 on our agenda, which is an update regarding debris removal and levee repair.
All right. Good evening, trustees. Steve Loop, County of San Benito Public Works Administrator, and I'm going to be giving you first an update on our debris removal and levee repairs. So regarding the debris removal, kind of the final step, last step is to obtain burn permits from the Hollister Fire Department. So we've been reaching out to them. They're ready to issue the permits. I think we'll probably have to get some signatures from the actual property owners to do that, and then hopefully in the next few weeks the piles will be dried out a little bit more and we can actually burn the debris piles, and then that activity is complete from a construction standpoint, and we'll talk about the funding on the next item. Regarding the levee repairs, the tops of the levees, I'll say, that have been restored to elevation that is above kind of the existing levees downstream. So in other words, we still do have a few more feet in one of the areas. I'll talk about that in a second. But generally speaking, the levees in every spot have been restored to an elevation that's kind of even with the levees around the general area of the creek. So that's the good news. The not great news is we knew that the current larger restoration part of the levee was going to require some form of planting or hydroseeding or mitigation to kind of hold the soil in place during a storm. So I reached out to the water board and to start that conversation, and they said, yes, you're correct. You will have to do some planting and things to the levees, and construction cannot commence until we have that plan in place. So I've been coordinating with one of our environmental consultants to get some pricing on a planting plan and a mitigation, what they call it is a mitigation monitoring plan. So after we do, let's just say it's going to be hydroseeding, which is essentially native grass seeds, and or if there are going to be any other planting around the levee to keep it from eroding, then there's steps to kind of monitor that effort. And so I reached out to one of our bigger environmental firms to get some pricing on that, and so we're working through that. I think hopefully we can get the pricing, maybe even this week, and submit that to the water board for their approval. We'll have to submit a permit to do that, but until we get that worked out, the final restoration of the levee is going to be on hold. And so that's the status of the construction. So I will pause there for questions.
Steve, I have a question. So you were looking at some of the levees that the erosion part of it was slimming the levee part of it. I'm trying to make myself clear here, sorry. How did you analyze the whole creek as to which ones were slimming down by erosion that they might need some filling up?
So what we've done for the levee repairs, just to take one step back to answer your question, is where the breaches occurred, that was a status that I provided. You're 100% correct that there are areas that I'll talk about on another item where there's erosion of the levee that's occurring for different reasons, and that's really just going to have to be a separate project. And there's a few areas that if we had the money and funding, the district had the money and funding, that we would want to either put some riprap, big rocks, or some sheet piles, some steel walls there to kind of shore up those areas, because it needs to get done sooner or later, because there are areas that you're saying correctly, that the levee itself is, the width is kind of thinning due to erosion. But that wasn't what FEMA and the effort from the last year was, to basically just build back where the breaches occurred and just get the levee built back up from where it spilled or broke through. But those other areas do exist, and so we just need to get some funding to help address those areas.
Because I know in the past they used to just go through right through the center of that creek and just build from whatever the sludge is in the middle, put it out, and that would build up those levees. But from the conversation that we were having earlier with Mr. Ryan, it's like if we have constant flow, then we wouldn't be able to do that. But if we go through a dry spell during the summer, how can we actually really go in there and try and dig out some of that center stuff and put it out into the sides of the levee of the creek?
So, decades ago, everything you said absolutely happened. The property owners would enter the creek and essentially take what had washed down into the riverbed and put that to the sides. And actually, my guess is that actually helped build the levees even originally, right? Nowadays, we can't do that. We just have to it has to be a project, and we have to get permitted to do that. And I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just it's not as easy as it was maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, plus or minus, when folks would do that. So it just has to be a project, I guess, is to answer your question. And we have to get clearance from the Water Board, Fish and Wildlife, maybe Army Corps, although Army Corps doesn't seem to have much interest in this part of the creek, but definitely from the Water Board and Fish and Wildlife. Some other folks too, maybe. So.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one public comment via Zoom. Grant Bryan, you have been unmuted.
Yes, so I actually had a thought that I wanted to kind of throw out there, and that is that when you're talking about planting plans for strengthening the levees, obviously native grasses are something which are the go-to right now that people like to put on levee type areas, but they don't actually hold the levee itself. What they do is they decrease the erosion to occur on the top of the levee. And they don't actually do much when you're talking about the flow of the creek. And so what I was just going to kind of throw out there is that we went ahead on Tequisquita Slough on our property, and we worked with a natural areas on farms group, which is based out of Santa Cruz County. And we planted a batch of trees and actually, yeah, trees. We didn't, in our case, put bushes, but that's something which there are, in fact, I'm going to put them as semi-cookie cutter kinds of plans for protection of water quality protection, etc., of creek bank plantings that can be repurposed, I would say. And I was going to suggest, Steve, that that might be a very good idea.
Yeah, I concur. And actually, oh, I'm sorry. Go. There's the other comment.
So that was what I was wanting to bring up.
There are no additional public comments.
Should I respond to the suggestion?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, when I spoke to the biologists from the environmental firm, it sounded like they have a team that does similar kinds of suggestions, and I think those are very good ideas. And so we'll see where that goes, but yeah, and just for folks that are listening, we probably won't be planting trees so much quote on the top of the levee, but just as was suggested, just around the levee to help strengthen it. So yeah, that's a viable suggestion and could be what we end up implementing for our levees here. So we'll just see what those folks mentioned. I wrote down natural areas on farms, so I can reach out to the resident public commenter and get his input too, because if it's worked recently, then we'll definitely consider it.
Okay, thank you, Steve. If there are no other questions or public comments, then we will move on to the next agenda item, which is an update on the status of the FEMA applications.
All right, item 5.3, the status on the FEMA application. So, for debris removal, after we received the burn permits, we're hoping that the FEMA environmental group will allow the project to move forward towards kind of the reimbursement phase. The standard protocol we've been told by FEMA is that you have to burn the piles and take pictures of the ashes, so to speak, and then you upload those photos onto the FEMA website, and then the construction is quote complete. But we're gonna, hopefully after the burn permits are issued, we're gonna just submit those permits, and hopefully that'll move it forward to reimbursement. We don't know if that's gonna happen, but that's the plan for debris removal and reimbursement, which is a separate project from the levee repairs. So a little bit of good news on levee repairs and in FEMA. Their environmental group actually analyzed the project on March 4th, according to the website portal, and they're in the process of issuing a request for information back to Pacheco Stormwater District. It doesn't have any other information about what that RFI, request for information, might pertain to. But the good news is that there's some movement there, which we've been waiting for a few months for just the environmental folks to make some movement. So it is good news, and we'll just wait to receive the RFI. I'd say about 20% of our projects receive RFIs at some point, because the projects are big and complicated a lot of times, and so FEMA will just ask for more information, so it's not unusual. But so a little bit of movement there, and that's the status for FEMA applications.
Any questions from the trustees? Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right. We will move on then to an update on tree removal from the creek near the Lover's Lane Bridge. So we'll go ahead, Steve, and sort of summarize what we've done so far there.
You bet. So, a few weeks back, we were able to obtain some county funding to remove trees out of the creek. I think it was about 3 weeks ago, roughly, plus or minus. And those trees had fallen on private property and kind of compromised part of the levee, and so we were able to extract those trees and remove them on kind of an emergency contract. Subsequent, or since that has occurred, there's been at least one more tree that fell into the creek about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and did somewhat similar damage. It wasn't quite as the same, or I don't know, the extent perhaps as happened previously. And I think that tree, the best of my knowledge, is still there, for better or for worse. So I came out with an arborist and just to look at kind of the trees that were out there. And right now, currently, the county is processing a contract with a tree removal firm and that arborist that works for them to remove the tree. There's a kind of larger tree near the bridge, the Lover's Lane Bridge, on the west side of the bridge, basically within county right of way, as best we can tell. And so we're processing the contract to remove that tree, just to be conservative and proactive, because it is leaning and it could compromise the bridge itself, which is also a county facility. And so we're removing that tree. And as far as the on-site work goes, for the tree that's down and any levee repairs, we don't have any funding or effort to do that at the moment. And then I do know that the trustees here have reached out to the county to try to perhaps use some of the remaining funding that we might have from the $1.6 million loan to perhaps help that effort, and perhaps, I don't know, if there's extra funding to use that money to strengthen up other portions of the levee that might be eroding away, as the other trustee mentioned previously. But I haven't heard internally from the supervisors any further, input or direction from that request, but I know that Michelle, the trustee here, had made the request, and maybe there's a little bit of movement there initially, but I'm not sure recently if there's any further, so I'll just pause.
Yes, I did. After our last meeting in February, I did send an email to Supervisors Gonzalez and Zanger, and they, Supervisor Gonzalez forwarded my request to the chair of the Board of Supervisors and said that they would try to get it on the agenda. And we were hoping it would be on the agenda for tomorrow, the March 26th Board of Supervisors meeting, but unfortunately that was not possible. So my understanding is that hopefully it'll be on the agenda for the next Board of Supervisors meeting, which would be April 9th. As far as you can tell, Steve? Yes.
Yes, I mean, yes, that I think I put a placeholder for the 9th after we spoke a few days ago or last week. I'll get it on the agenda, and then we'll have agenda review internally, and that's when it'll be discussed. But it'll be The draft will be on that agenda, I'll say that much, so hopefully
Okay.
it'll go to the final agenda.
Well, and if that is the case, then I would encourage everyone who has an interest in this to come to that meeting and to speak in favor of this. Again, this is a request to the Board of Supervisors to amend our agreement with them, our loan agreement, for them to allow us to use the excess money because they ended up loaning us 1.6 million, and it turns out we're not going to be using all of that to do the FEMA work, the work that FEMA is going to reimburse. So there will be some left over, and can we just use that for some other preventative emergency? Well, they are sort of emergency repairs, right? But they're repairs that weren't covered by the FEMA applications. So put that on your calendar, April 9th, the Board of Supervisors meetings. It's in the morning typically, right? It starts at 9 a.m. So the more people that can come and speak in favor of that, the better chance we will have of getting that passed. So, okay, do the trustees have any comments or questions on this item? No. Okay. Is there public comment?
There is no public comment at this time.
Okay. Then we will move on. So I guess, Steve, you're done, at least for now. The next item is a report by Sean Cameron on the process for expanding district boundaries. And so just before we get started with Sean's report, we're not going to be actually deciding today whether we're going to expand the boundaries of the district, or, I mean, we're nowhere near that point. This is just a discussion. We're opening the discussion on if we wanted to expand the geographical boundaries of the district to include more properties, how would we go about doing that? So that's what this is about. So, Sean, take it
That's
away.
right. This is so good evening, trustees. Sean Cameron, your legal counsel. I do have a presentation. If we can put that up. But yeah, like the chair said, this is going to be very general and sort of an introduction to the process. We did meet with a representative from LAFCO, and that's essentially where this came from. So,
Sean, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you explain briefly what LAFCO is?
So it's a local agency formation commission, and it's basically the body you go to if you want to, expand your boundaries. That's essentially that's their wheelhouse. That's what they do. And so we went to them to sort of get an introduction and get a general sense of what is required to do that. So the district could try to expand its boundaries by annexing more properties, essentially just growing the geographic scope of the district. So the water district would have to start by passing a resolution. And we sort of had the idea to potentially look to add properties in the flood zone area designated by FEMA. FEMA has a map that sort of shows the floodplain and sort of the properties within it. So we thought those properties might potentially be interested in becoming part of the water district. So that would require mapping and a legal description of land properties being proposed. So there is some significant work to do in that regard. The LAFCO has forms online. That part of it is fairly simple. They just have a website that you go to, and it lists out, various forms you can fill out to apply, including a questionnaire. But that part of it wasn't overly burdensome as far as I could tell. And then we'd have to deal with CEQA. But I don't think there's likely to be an exemption under this, because we would simply be expanding our boundaries and not proposing any sort of project per se. And CEQA is triggered by projects and sort of development projects. But it would require application fees. I'm not sure what the fees would be, but as we know, we have a lack of sort of funding to pay for these sort of things, so that would be obviously a consideration here. And then once you apply, your application is reviewed by other agencies. Basically, the LAFCO reaches out to other, sort of stakeholders or people that could be affected by that expansion, and gets their input. There would also need to be tax negotiations between the county and the district. And property owners can protest being annexed into the territory, of course. So they're private property owners, and so they can push back if they don't want to become part of the district. And so the math on that is if 25% to 49% protest being annexed, then it would go to an election. If 50% or more protest, then it would kill the annexation. And instead of seeking that, you can try to get written consent from the affected property owners. And so sort of along those same lines, my sort of thought was to reach out to sort of figure out which property owners we would consider adding, and then just doing sort of an informal survey to get the temperature on whether they would want to become a part of the district. I don't know how much that would cost necessarily, but I have a feeling it would be less costly than going through this process, and it might be helpful in getting sort of a sense of whether this is possible or not.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So are there any questions or comments from the trustees?
My question is, bringing them into the district, does this also title them as being flood zone, their properties?
No, I don't think it would change that designation. That comes from the FEMA analysis there. But the idea was, to reach out to those people that were in the flood zone, because obviously they're within the flood zone and might be affected by.
But those who are not in the flood zone, if they're near the boundary that we're trying to.
Sure, you could expand it beyond that. Yeah, that was just our thought process, was to limit
But they
it.
won't be called flood zone. their
No, it
property.
would not reclassify
Okay.
them as being flood zone properties,
Okay.
right? No, it wouldn't change that designation.
Thank you.
So I guess the two things that we need to consider are, one, what could the potential benefits be for our district as it exists now, and then two, what could we use as a selling point for the people that we're asking if they want to join, right? What are the benefits for them? The benefits for us, well, one, we would have a larger pool of people to be trustees, to do things, to sit on committees, to help with whatever needs to be done. Also, if we ever do actually get some kind of tax assessment passed, then it would be a larger pool of people to generate tax revenue, right? So those are the two most obvious benefits that I see. In terms of the benefits, what would the benefit be to the people that we are trying to annex here, the properties? Well, I mean, I guess they would have more of say and input on the policy, right? I mean, if they are in a flood zone, that what we do with this creek does impact them, right? So I guess we would have to sell it to them that way. Now there are, we were looking, so this framework came out of a conversation that Sean and I had with Jennifer Stevenson from LAFCO, from our local LAFCO. And this was one of her suggestions as well, take a look at the flood map. And the map that we were looking at, it's like 100-year flood zone or something. I mean, not every property on that map was flooded, for instance, last year, right?
Right, correct.
But it's potential for flooding.
Right.
So I guess that's how we would have to.
Yeah, you would imagine this would be on their radar based on the past or the recent flooding.
Yes.
So they may want to stake in
Yeah.
dealing with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from trustees? Okay. What about public comment?
There is no public comment right at the moment.
Okay.
So I would just ask: do we have direction to sort of pursue this idea further, or is this where this stops?
I don't think there are any downsides, unless there are significant upfront costs. But your idea of a survey is kind of intriguing. That wouldn't be very cost prohibitive, really.
Right, that was my idea.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, we have some sort of list, right? Of, I guess it wouldn't. I guess it might not include those individuals, but
We have a list of people that are the properties that are in the current boundaries.
right.
But I'm sure that if we worked with the county, we could probably come up with a list of other adjacent property owners.
Right. It could be a mailer if nothing else, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, do we need to vote on that?
No, I just would want sort of a general
Yeah.
idea of that this is something we want to do as a body.
I think it's something that we could pursue.
Okay.
Because it's a really small little pocket for right now, and
Right.
if we get a lot of other people, like the first time that we met, if all those people would probably participate, then we'd get a little bit more feedback.
Right.
I think we need to expand a bit.
Okay. What do you think, so? Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Sean.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, next up on the agenda is update from advisory board regarding grant opportunities. We did have an advisory board meeting earlier this month, a couple weeks ago, on March 9th. Not too much really new to report. One thing that I can report, so there was a concern because when you apply for or do business with the federal government, you have to register through this thing called SAM. And we had, the county actually, Joel Ellenwood, at the very beginning in March of 2023 had established a registration for us. And it was up for renewal, but the problem was that I couldn't access the account because it was linked to Joel's old county-issued phone number. And so that was kind of a stumbling block because to move forward, we had to renew this registration. But I'm happy to report that I was able to work with the new, the person that had been assigned Joel's old phone number. I was able to work with her and get access to the account and change the phone number. So we can now actually access the account, and I was able to renew the registration. We got an email just today, I think, or yesterday, that we had been renewed for another year. So that is good news, so that we can move forward with grant applications if we so desire. Okay, so Lucinda and Bill were at the meeting, and do you have anything you'd like to report about our advisory board meeting? Sure.
Hello, it's Lucinda here again. Yeah, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and Rochelle barely was there. We were at her place, and me and my husband were there, and Rochelle. So basically, we did talk about the USDA possibility and some other work, and also my activities in trying to see to dispose or something, getting grants that way. And so I think our main concern was trying to get that SAM UEI number and not being able to go and renew it. And since I couldn't have, and since it was, the Pacheco Pass Water District emails actually through Michelle. It would be better for her to try to get that cleared up. And so, thank you for that. So now we can start pursuing and seeing if we can get some grants looking in. So I've been meeting, and so hopefully getting some understanding, and maybe Rochelle did say we need some mentorship because we have no experience in how to do this. And I have no clue, but I'm working on it, and hopefully I'll be talking to Madison and maybe some other people to contact. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to say though at that meeting, that Rochelle did take this on a tour, me and my husband, for her repairs that happened, and it was, wow, that was really nice. It looked really, really nice. We really thought they did a great work in doing that cleanup. And hopefully we'll continue down my side too. Okay, Steve. Okay, but that's the only update. Thanks. We'll let you guys know.
Thanks, Lucinda. I don't know if Rochelle is on Zoom. She wasn't feeling well.
She is not on Zoom.
Okay. All right. Is there any public comment?
It appears there is no public comment at this time.
Okay. Anything else from the trustees? Any questions or comments? Okay, then we will move on to discussion of options for community-led maintenance. Okay, so if you will recall, this has to do with the idea that maybe we could somehow do at least some of these repairs on our own, by either purchasing or renting equipment and just doing it the way that it used to be done back in the day, or something similar. And I invited Grant Bryans to attend via Zoom. Hopefully he's still there to see if what some of his ideas were. And also Steve, it looks like you have something too. So let's start with you.
Okay, fair enough. So, from our county standpoint, we've been working with a group called CHEER, which stands for Coastal Habitat Education and Environmental Restoration. They're a nonprofit group, and as John from the Valley Water mentioned earlier, what they do something similar to what the Water District or Valley Water does is they organize communities and their own staff, and they essentially remove smaller debris and trash from creek areas. And so I had a discussion with Herman Garcia, he's our president, last week about Pacheco Creek. He said he would love to have his team coordinate with the Pacheco Stormwater District to perform a similar cleanup of the creek, and probably during the summertime. And yeah, so it's on his radar, and they're a big fan of things that will help environment, and he's a big fan of helping fish swim to new places as well. So yeah, that's the update from the county side, and I'll just pause there for
Okay, well that's great. That's good news. So what would be the next step, you think? Should we invite him to one of our meetings, or should we have like separate one-on-one, or what should we do?
No, it's somewhat informal. We could even just have kind of a Zoom meeting with one or two of the trustees and Herman, and we just basically need to get it on his schedule for the summertime. So hopefully we can all remind each other to do that. They've helped us over the past 2 summers in San Benito River in general, clean quite a bit. They also clean tires or remove tires and somewhat larger objects, but not trees, and they don't do any big tree clearing, but any kind of trash and debris they can usually extract from the creeks with their efforts. So it's just, we'll set up a meeting, could be a little Zoom meeting, and just a few of the folks here in the county, maybe schedule that for maybe the end of next month, and just to get on his so to speak, reserve them for a weekend, and then, you know, reach out to some of the local residents if they want to get in the creek and clean. And he has kind of a blanket permit with the permitting agencies, because they're not allowed to remove living things, but any, you know, just trash and debris, they can go in there and they take some trucks and things and remove it out of the creeks. And so yeah, so that's pretty much the process.
Great. I have a question. So since we have easements on most of the properties, would we need permission if we had volunteers, or if we were bringing volunteers down to clean out trash?
You'd have to look at the easements, but I would always
Yeah.
encourage you to get that sort of consent, yes.
Okay. So that's something on a practical level that we would have to do, right?
Yeah, we try whenever we enter a property, like Sean said, the district easements usually say you can do creek maintenance activities, but you always want to notify the property owners. You never know what you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
But so we try to do that outreach first, absolutely. And then, from the easement language I've read, the verbiage, I think the district's definitely allowed to perform those activities.
Question from the trustee.
I have a question. I don't want to sound here presumptuous, but my creek is clean. If my creek does not have a lot of garbage or anything like that, but it does have a lot of huge trees smack in the middle of the creek, and you said nothing that is alive, but those weren't there in the very beginning. It's just been years of no attention to it, and now they became trees, not little shrubs or bushes, trees, huge.
Well, I understand your question and your request. I will say, if we can, you know, take some pictures, show Fish and Wildlife what our intent is, especially if they're not native trees. There's a few trees and things that Fish and Wildlife they want to have remain if at all possible. But let's just say hypothetically they're not native, they're not enhancing the environment. I think Fish and Wildlife would consider allowing us to remove small focused areas like that. No guarantees, but we can make the request, and fingers crossed and hope for the best.
I have a comment. When you say that remove the trees inside the creek, I mean the creek is supposed to be clean inside. Outside is something different, but all in the center where the water is supposed to run in, I mean, with no problem, we're supposed to remove all those trees, right? No matter if it's native or no native.
So, a couple things. One, if there's loose debris, branches, those type of things, the tree that's fallen over and the creek's dry, I think that's not as much of an issue. If it's a living tree in the creek, nowadays, through the permitting agencies, we just need permission to remove those. I'm not saying they won't allow us, I'm just saying we need to ask for permission. And that's just the state of California and the environment. So I understand the goal is to clean out the creek, to allow it to move and function like a creek. The county agrees with that concept. We just have to apply for a permit to allow that to happen. So yeah, I understand.
Okay. So is Grant still on the line?
Yes.
Okay.
Grant Bryant, you
So-
have been muted.
So, first of all, I'm going to make the comment that, Steve, I was very interested to hear about how you guys have worked with Chair. It is also clearly the issue, and I speak from having walked the creek when it has been low enough many, many, many times, that there is trash that does come down. Most of it gets blown out of the creek and into the fields where actually I'm farming on Michelle and the Florex properties. That is an area, or it goes all the way down to San Felipe Lake. But the amount of actual in the creek and on the creek banks trash that would be logically needing to be removed is pretty small. This goes back actually to my comments to the Santa Clara Valley Water District individual, that it is important that there is a dry time, as there historically has been in going through the cycles of drought and non-drought conditions. And so, what I keep looking at and trying to think about is, unless we go back to the making sure that there is a 1 to 3 month dry time that happens at least every other year or thereabouts, then how do we go ahead and do both removal of trees that are in the middle of, or pardon me, that are in the creek, not protecting the banks, and also if there are, as do typically happen from time to time, buildups of gravel which decrease the depth of the creek to well below historical depths. That's one of the other issues that we do have here, is that the actual depth of the creek itself is at least 4 to 5 feet less than what it was in the 1970s and before. That obviously reduces the flow capabilities of the creek dramatically, and it also increases the pressure on the trees that do protect on the creek side of the levees themselves. So, I really see this as, we need to come up with somehow a way to get regulatory permission
So,
to go ahead and actually get in there with heavy machinery. And that
Gr-
if there is somebody local who can do it in the area, then obviously that's going to be far, far less costly. And that's part of what I wanted to think about in terms of the locally driven.
okay, Grant, I'm going to ask you more questions about that in a second, but let's let Steve respond to what you just said.
You bet. So, yes, I've heard from a few ranchers, farmers, that there has been sediment, as Mr. Brian just mentioned, 4 feet, 5 feet. They said 7 feet, 8 feet of just sediment buildup deposited into the creek that's reduced the capacity, because instead of watering flowing through that area, it's built up with sediments. And so, anecdotally, I've heard the exact same thing from other folks, and not just Mr. Bryan's, that has occurred. And so that's number one. Number two, the county concurs 100% that we need some dry period. That's why I mentioned, hopefully we can work with Valley Water to have some time, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, where the creek is just dry, to get in there with permits and with equipment and be allowed to clean out the creek. I absolutely agree that needs to occur. Now, how that happens and how the funding occurs. One thing to mention is, if Pacheco Stormwater District were to fund that effort, they have to use prevailing wages, which sometimes obviously makes things a little more expensive. Whereas if there was some other funding source outside of the districts, you can reduce costs by 30–40%. So just to kind of keep that, let's just say that property owners had a fundraiser and a few car washes, I don't know, and raise some money. Just the private property owners, you could save a good amount of money just by not paying prevailing wages for that effort. But I agree. I mean, there's definitely competing interests, especially if the fish were to somehow swim upstream through Miller Slough to this area. There'll be a lot of folks that want to maintain at least the low flow channel, which is the deeper part of the creek, to have water. But unless we can get access to the full creek during dry season, we're not going to be able to clean the creek completely. So we need to make that our goal. When the district applies to the Fish and Wildlife for a stream maintenance agreement, we definitely want to say, hey, we need some time, maybe it's every other year or every year for a couple months out of the year. The request is to clean out the creek. And maybe since the Pacheco dam expansion isn't set to occur until 2027, if the Pacheco Stormwater District can get in there before that time, over the next 2.5 years, before that potential fish migration occurs, maybe that's a good window of opportunity and some motivation for all of us to act quicker to try to get into the creek during the next couple of years before potentially fish could swim in that area. So that's kind of my input in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So, part of my goal in putting this on the agenda was to sort of discuss more the ideas that have been brought up about, again, buying equipment and doing this on our own and that sort of thing. Of course, since the idea was first brought up, we decided that, we tried to get general liability insurance and no one would insure us. So we decided that we were just going to abandon the idea of getting insurance altogether. So that's a problem, right, at this point, for even if we wanted to buy our own equipment and do our own work, we have no insurance for that, and no one would probably insure us. So that's one problem. But I wanted to ask if anybody had any other ideas. Just thinking outside the box here. Is there any other way to do this? And Grant, you and I had a conversation a couple months ago about it, and you had some ideas. Could you sort of briefly outline those for us now?
Well, and I will first say that I am not as well prepared on that as I would like to be, but one of the things actually that I thought about, which should have been in my first thoughts that I talked to you about, is with the sediment deposition that has occurred, at least every time that I've walked the creek, and this is, of course, primarily on the section that is by your house and beyond. I haven't been on the section between Lover's Lane and San Felipe now for quite a while. Almost all of the sediment deposition is sand and rock. And given the amount that has actually been deposited there, it occurred to me, well, if we were to take it back to the historical level, and by historical, I'm not saying 1970s, I'm talking about, again, take this back to 19th century, then that's a significant amount of potential material for roads, for decorative gravel, etc. So no, there's not a full-scale quarry kind of a thing. That would be ridiculous. That would be something that the process of going through that would exceed every possible benefit that we could even think about as far as the costs of doing so. But what if that were a partial funding source for the cleaning? Also, I know that part of what you were referring to as far as what I talked about is I really am trying to figure out how I can come up with an excavator. And, historically what we did to get things out of the creek is it was all bulldozer work. We're not talking about D9s or something like that. And then using loaders to go ahead and simply load that material into trucks, in addition to the putting some of it up against the actual levees themselves. The reason why I say some of it is because given what the material is, the size of the gravel that comes down the creek is such that it isn't going to be a major holding things together beyond what the roots that go into it can do to hold it together. And so, that's something that private parties could go ahead and actually have the machinery. I mean, heck, I have 2 bulldozers. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't other people in the area who would actually be willing to go ahead and, if the fuel were paid for and such, to go ahead and actually do some of that removal work.
Okay, thanks, Grant. I'm gonna have Steve respond here. I'm curious about his take on this.
So, I can, but is there a specific aspect of that to
Well,
respond to?
first, let's take the last point first. So, like, if we had people, okay, we don't have an excavator, but if we had people with bulldozers, how much could we get done with bulldozers?
You can get actually quite a bit done with bulldozers, but I would just caution folks that I know it's private property and it's private property owners, quote, own half the creek, generally speaking. Whenever you're in, quote, a creek, you're still supposed to get permits if you're going to affect, living things, I'll say. And sometimes, even if you're just moving gravel and rock around, you should ask the permitting agencies for permission to do that. But to answer the question, you just get some decent bulldozers and a loader, you can do quite a bit. And an excavator essentially is just a big piece of equipment that has an arm and essentially a claw, and you can kind of scoop things and do things from that you need to reach essentially. So that would be helpful as well. But I'll just pause it.
Assuming that we got permits, well, I mean, yes, obviously we need to get permits. Would they, when they issue the permit, do they tell you exactly how you have to do it and who you have to hire the way that FEMA is telling us, or is it more just this is what you're allowed to do?
It's more the latter, and actually FEMA wouldn't not be involved. They got involved because we declared, and the governor essentially, we the county and then the governor declared a natural disaster, and then FEMA said, yeah, well, it's a natural disaster, and so that's how FEMA got involved in the process. But outside of a natural disaster, it's just the state permitting agencies and could be the Army Corps, but there's 3 to 4 permitting agencies you consult with, and we say this is what we like to do. Can we do it? and they say yes or no, and that's it. And then again, the county would work with the district to try to get Fish and Wildlife is the main agency to do a stream maintenance agreement, they call it, to perform some of those activities. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So, but
So-
go ahead.
So I mean, we could potentially get a permit for sediment removal as well. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we got a permit to remove sediment,
Mhm.
I mean, I mean, is it realistic to think that a quarry might actually be interested in taking some of that off of our hands and doing that work?
It is realistic. I mean, definitely want to reach out to the quarries, and luckily Ariel's here, and she's kind of our quarry oversight person, coordinator person, and not that that discussion should happen tonight, but the quarries, the biggest property owner along San Benito River by far is, a quarry, and they use the riverbed with, they legally use the riverbed to mine it, as Mr. Bryan just mentioned. So it's definitely a possibility. I don't know how that interaction would occur, but yeah, the riverbeds have some valuable material, and that's when there's a few quarries that actually, that's how they kind of built their business.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Okay, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment at this time.
Okay. All right. Then let's move on. Update on publicity and outreach activities. I don't have any updates. I don't know if anybody else has any updates on publicity and outreach activities. No? Okay. Is there any public comment on this agenda item?
There appears to be no public comment at this time.
Okay. All right, so then that just brings us to a discussion of future agenda items. So do the trustees have some suggestions for future agenda items? Okay, all right. Is there any public comment on future agenda items?
Yes, we have a public comment via Zoom. Grant Bryans, you have been muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I would encourage keeping, at least at a minimum on the back burner, the community-led maintenance item, such that if there is progress that can be made there, that it will be an ongoing process. Oh, and also the other thing was that I do agree with you that supporting with appropriate, shall we say, operational parameters, the replacement of Pacheco Dam is something that I do think has a lot of value.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
There appears to be no further public comment.
All right then. All that's left is to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I motion that we adjourn today's meeting, March 25th.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is April 22nd, I believe. So we will see you all then. Thank you.